Oh, hello, welcome everyone to Setting Boundaries with Kids, this free workshop that Ash and I are running. Ash, I'm going to get you to share the slides if possible. So, do you have share screen option?
Mhm. Mhm. Is that working?
It's black on my end.
Weird. Okay, let me see.
Got it, got it.
Okay, and I'll get that going.
Beautiful. All right. So, this workshop, honestly, a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a client. About how hard it was for her to set boundaries with her child. And there were so many dynamics at play. And I thought, gosh, this is a really good opportunity and a really good idea for us to pick Ash's brains. So we're going to jump a little bit into Ash. Can you slide forward one for me? Who Ash is, who I am, for those of you who are new to us. We did have a huge number of you sign up for this workshop, so I hope it is valuable. So, for those of you who don't know, I am Carrie. I'm a chiropractor and I'm in Perth, Western Australia, and I deal mostly with the autonomic nervous system, which includes the vagus nerve. And what I do in practice is body work that enables the nervous system to function as it is innately designed to do. And that includes creating more safety in the system on a physical level. So I see a lot of families. I see a lot of children with nervous system dysregulation, and then how that feeds into the mum and how the mum is feeding into the child becomes this huge dynamic, right? And sometimes when you're stuck in it as a parent, it can be really hard to discern, is it me? Is it my child? Is it both of us? Is it trauma? Is it like present time dysregulation? Like, what is going on? And the dynamic kind of spirals down, 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 right? So while I'm doing the body work, I have Ash supporting me doing the somatic and the emotional work. So Ash works online and consults one-on-one and in group sessions to support my clients in their regulation capacity and just kind of delving deeper into any traumas or conditioning that may be driving behaviors. So Ash really has a knack for sensitive people, highly sensitive people, neurodivergent people, recovering people pleasers, survivors of trauma, abuse, and DV, those overcoming burnout, chronic illness, and overwhelming stress. So I'm sure you fit under at least one of those banners. Because that's the kind of person that I typically attract to my practice. And you might feel like you fit under all of those banners. So if you do, welcome, you're in the right place. And I am going to hand it over to Ash now to go through specifically some practical things you can do to support setting boundaries with your child when you're feeling really stressed, overwhelmed, dysregulated yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm gonna start here. So welcome. So glad to be chatting and teaching, and so today we're gonna talk about some really practical ways to hold boundaries with kids. And you might have tried some of these already. And we will get back to at the end if you've tried all these and it hasn't worked, what to do next. Yeah. So we're going to discuss some common misconceptions around boundaries, how to set them clearly with respectful behaviors, and how to regulate your own nervous system. Also, how to validate feelings and hold space for your kids while setting boundaries. um, Encouraging them to take ownership and autonomy so that we can support co-regulation and help your boundaries get through. Also, trying redirection and positive reinforcement, natural consequences versus punishment, and how to help your children set their own boundaries so they can have a greater understanding of boundaries. So firstly, what are boundaries, right? We know that boundaries that are essential, they provide structure and guidance. They help our children navigate the world, right? They also build trust and predictability in the support that you're offering, and that helps them have more emotional regulation and understand how to move in the world safely. It also fosters a sense of responsibility and ownership over their own actions. So it can reduce power struggles and empower children to name and navigate their feelings and experiences. This is really important what boundaries are not, right? So we hear the term boundaries getting used all the time. And sometimes it's used in respectful ways, and sometimes it's kind of misunderstood and can be applied when people are using it more about kind of implying the way they want to control or dictate a child's behavior. However, true boundaries aren't actually about control. They're about guidance, safety, and mutual respect. So boundaries should feel like secure guidelines and not like restrictions. So they should actually help the regulation of emotions and support of emotions. And that's a really important aspect. And so is self-expression. So our little ones are learning to navigate their emotions, other people's boundaries, their own boundaries, and the entire world and everything that they're hearing and learning. And there's a lot they're taking in, right? They're learning really quickly. And so the ways in which we set boundaries can actually really help them navigate the world and also feel a very secure attachment within your family system.
Ash, I really want to interrupt and
Yeah,
just
go for it.
ask the quote because it's so simple is like there's safety in the structure. And
Yeah,
you really touched on that with, it is a loving way to create that safety with your kids. It's not meant for control, it's meant for that mutual respect. And even though it can feel hard, which is why people are here and signed up for this workshop, right?
yeah,
It does, if done in the right way, it creates that safety for your
yeah,
relationship, for your child. They know, they understand what their limits are, and they feel safe in that and confident in that. So yeah.
yeah. 100%. And we do too, right? Adults do too. So these can all be applied also in our workspaces, in our friendships. We really all thrive when we feel that structure and security and understanding of other people's boundaries. So here are some helpful ways. Again, you might have tried some of these. So do let us know what you've tried, what hasn't really worked, um, and then learn more about how we can kind of apply these better. So regulating your own emotions. So we have mirror neurons, right? And they're really important because it means that children can sense our nervous system and emotional activation. Yeah, and then they mirror these reactions. So they're learning how to emotionally regulate themselves by watching how we are handling our own stress and frustration and conflicts. Yeah. We can't expect our children to have more emotional regulation than we do. And this is often what I see, right? A lot of parents feeling very frustrated in themselves and then yelling at their child for yelling. And we can't like expect them to see that behavior being modeled and then learn from what we're trying to tell them to do. It's kind of a monkey see, monkey do, or um, we've got to kind of walk the walk that we're talking. I'm trying to remember how that phrase goes. You guys understand what I'm saying. Um, so the first one is taking a pause, right? You notice yourself getting triggered. You notice yourself boiling. You'll notice those sensations in your body that are telling you your fight flight is coming in. Um, you want to take that pause, take a deep breath, use those soothing tools that you've learned in therapy, you've learned with Carrie, and then model the behaviors you want to see instead. Yeah, so respond thoughtfully. That's not to say that you're supposed to be a Zen monk. You're not supposed to be calm all the time. Healthy regulation actually means we are supposed to have moments where we have that sympathetic activation, but how we use it is really important. So using it in ways like yelling or punching and throwing things, right? That's not going to be very effective. You can use all that energy you need to like by yourself or in therapy. Let's get that stuff off your chest. But using it when you're trying to set a boundary is going to be super confusing and will probably be met with, maybe more yelling, more dysregulation, crying. So be mindful of your responses, and just do your best to stay as calm and composed as you can, despite the challenges. Um, so becoming aware of your own activation is noticing those little triggers in your body, right? What does activation feel like to you? And you might notice some things like you might notice your heart rate, or you might notice you're getting sweaty. You might notice that your breathing feels restricted. So we need to use these as our signs and signals from our body to identify our boundaries and needs, right? If we're noticing activation, it's actually telling us something. We're supposed to have this activation. We're not supposed to bury it. We're not supposed to just go with the flow and do whatever the child is doing, right? We're supposed to use this information to then decipher, what messages can we offer with clarity around what our boundaries look like and practice, and then practice certain tools to release that energy outside of the conversation with your child. This one's super important. I mean, they're all really important, but this one's so important to be clear and consistent, right? So we need to set really clear expectations. And sometimes that can look like, sometimes people feel like they're offering that, but they might be kind of getting jumbled with over explanation, or they might be using language that isn't clear to children, right? And we live as adults, so we're used to knowing lots of different types of words. We don't always consider that maybe some words aren't as familiar or as understood by our little ones. So we need to make it really simple, direct, and yeah. So instead of saying things like "be careful," actually have them consider how they're taking care, take care around this particular thing because, we want to stay really consistent. We want the boundaries to stay the same each time, and we don't want rules changing all the time. That will get them confused. Now, I have parents who might be co-parenting with an ex-partner, and they'll ask me, but won't they get confused? They've got certain boundaries at one house and certain boundaries at another house. And that's not quite the case, right? The point is that they have consistent boundaries with you. That the boundaries you're offering them are always staying structured and familiar. So they know what the safety looks like with you. We don't always have control over how other family members are holding their own boundaries, but that, the child's going to respond to however they're holding boundaries. So, yeah, avoid mixed signals. We don't want to have inconsistency. We don't want them to feel that boundaries are open to negotiation. Like, that doesn't mean that compromises can't happen, because they can, but we're being very careful to say that the boundary itself isn't flexible. Yeah. Finding the compromise to find the win-win is a different conversation. And yes, don't over explain it. Don't make it too complicated. Don't give them a long lecture about the way the world works, right? Just try and keep it really simple. And if they have questions, answer those questions. So here's an example. You could say, or some people might say, you can have one more cookie. Oh, no, maybe two. Oh, maybe three, maybe four, right? Or actually, it's half an hour before dinner. Sure, you can have another one. You know what I mean? So notice when you're becoming wishy-washy with your boundaries. And so consider what you would actually prefer to say instead. So one's enough, but we've got more for tomorrow, Or instead of saying, it's not nice to hit, and then going into an explanation about why we hurt people when we're hitting, we can say, we don't hit when we're mad. Let's use our words instead, right? We're redirecting them to how they can express what they're feeling in a way that's safer. We also might notice that when we express our boundaries, they're not always landing, right? So that could be a signal that there's some emotional dysregulation going on in our kids, because that's what's happening, right? Kids are big feelers, and even adults are a lot of big feelers too. But we need to make sure that kids feel validated with their feelings, because it will actually set up an environment for them to hear us better. So allowing them to feel seen and heard and develop that emotional security and trust in your relationship also helps them to identify and understand their own emotions and their responses to their emotions, so that they can build a greater capacity for self-regulation, healthy coping skills, and an openness to your feedback. So using active listening is a huge way to validate feelings. Yeah, and so when you use reflective language, you're reflecting back to them the emotions you can see. So it sounds like you're really upset with school right now. Yeah. Or it sounds like you're really sad, or I understand why you feel so sad. Yeah. Listen without judgment. Avoid dismissing or minimizing the experience. Acknowledge their feelings. That does sound really frustrating. Avoid pouring fuel on the fire, right? Don't add, more dysregulation to the mix. Do best to remain calm and try to attune to their experience, remembering that, yeah, they might be having a really big reaction to something that you feel is quite small, but that doesn't make it true in their world. Yeah, in their world, it feels like a fair response, right? So resist the urge to fix in this moment. Yeah, and if you're noticing a lot of big emotions, hold space for the emotions first and come to the solutions next. Because once the child feels heard, they're more likely to come back to regulation sooner. So just another example, instead of saying, stop yelling, there's no reason to cry, it's not a big deal, right? That's dismissive language. So we always want to say, I understand why you're upset. Would you like to take a break or talk about it? Or I can see why you're really frustrated, but and then you can offer a little bit of help regulating, should we take a breath together? So you being there with them in their moment does support co-regulation. So this one is redirection, guiding behavior with respect. Yeah. So this is about not just saying restrictions. And it's okay that sometimes we just need to say the restriction, right? So that we don't hit in this house, that's okay. But what we can follow that with, or what we can do in other times, is provide them with an alternative so that they can continue expressing themselves. And it's not a focus on what not to do, right? So we're not blocking them from being able to express themselves. We're redirecting them to something that feels a bit more healthy, and a bit more, within what would be within our family's boundaries. Yeah. So this helps to also build problem-solving skills, cooperation, and self-regulation. And they will start to apply this moving forward, right? And it becomes easier and easier to set the boundary. So let's have a look at these. Offering a safe alternative. Hitting your friend isn't okay, but you can hit this pillow to get that energy out. Yeah, reframing it. So instead of saying something like, don't shout, you can suggest, let's use our inside voices here. Yeah. Encouraging respect for boundaries. We don't draw on the walls, but we can decorate this big piece of paper. Finding the win-win. So acknowledging their needs, having a look at that underlying need. Like if they're drawing the wall, they want to express with crayons today. So we're we're redirecting them to where they can express with crayons. And in this, we've got, you want to keep playing, but it's bedtime. Let's choose one last game before we go. Yeah, so we're kind of finding that middle ground there, letting them know, okay, soon this boundary is coming in place, but here's a little compromise, or here's a little way to meet your need. Teach, don't control. The goal isn't about obedience. We don't want children doing what we're saying because they're scared of us or they're scared of the consequences or the punishment behind it. If we can teach them how to respect boundaries, then they will be equipped to learn how to have their own boundaries through life, how to respect other people's moving forward, and not just from a place of fear. So yeah, they do gain lifelong skills for decision making and emotional regulation. So instead of saying, stop making a mess, you can try, let's keep the sand in the sandbox and we can all play together. Re Reassuring them that you're in it with them, like you're there with them, is also a part that helps that co-regulation. Remember not to take it personally, right? Kids are not testing your boundaries because they're annoyed at you or they don't like you or they're purposely being disobedient. It's actually just a natural part of child development, right? So they're pushing back is a natural part of like exploring autonomy, testing limits, understanding cause and effect. So holding firm and supportive boundaries helps them to feel safe while they navigate these lessons. But remember not to take it too personally, right? It's not against you. Um, yeah. So how to respond when your boundaries are tested. Acknowledge their need for autonomy. I can see you would really like to play right now, but it's actually time for bed. Yeah. Stay calm and hold the boundary. Reacting with frustration will escalate the situation and the power struggles that are going on, right? They're going to keep seeing how much autonomy they have. And we know that developmentally, there are actually parts of children's developmental stages where this is going to be additionally tested, right? We especially see it, in the little toddler years when they're realizing that they're a separate being. We see it in their teen years when they're starting to test how much of an adult am I really, right? So it's a really healthy part of their development. So just keep a calm and confident tone, right? You are allowed to use a little activation here. You're allowed to raise your voice a bit. Go for that, but avoid kind of, pouring fuel on it. Don't go into yelling and get into the nitpicking and stuff with them because that's just gonna feed some sort of argument and more dysregulation. Avoid taking it personally. Their resistance is not about you. Offer structured choices. You can put your shoes on yourself, or I can help you. Yeah, so offer them a couple of versions, a couple of choices to guide them towards making some better decisions that kind of work more for the family. And encourage safe exploration of mistakes. Some boundaries are non-negotiable, but in other situations, allowing natural consequences can help children learn responsibility.
Ash, can I jump in for a sec
Oh, please do.
around this topic? Because I think this is probably the hardest one that I find mums report back in my clinic anyway, is that they'll set a boundary and they're really confident in it. And then their child will push back. And if they're already like sleep deprived or stressed, or they just need to get out the door to get the kids to school in time or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
they're already in that activated state and they haven't got much left to give. And
Yeah.
they they do take it personally, but that's the biggest struggle is like they're almost their stress response is too far gone
Yeah.
for them to be like, hang on, like why am I even reacting like this?
Yeah.
So I do try and encourage mums to just like, even if you have a rupture, and then you feel the guilt and you're like, why did I just yell at my child over that? Why did I create a power struggle over something like putting on shoes or socks or whatever? And it's like taking a step back and going, why did that trigger me so much? Why was that such a big
Mhm.
deal for me? And then like delving back into, oh yeah, that's how my mum treated me. Or
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
taking a moment. Once it's done, you've ruptured, you've repaired, everything is okay, but then going, oh, hang on, like, why was that even my response in the first place? Like,
yeah.
what made me need that power struggle? Like, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. And so many of us, look, we grew up in an environment that was um do as I say, not as I do. And we grew up in you do as I say because I'm the parent. Like, so we don't necessarily have the best examples ourselves. This behavior hasn't been modeled for us. We are all trying and practicing this stuff. We're not supposed to be perfect. That's okay that we're not. And like what you said, it's all about rupture and repair, right? When we can admit that we've made little mistakes ourselves or sometimes big mistakes ourselves, we can always come back to repair and help that co-regulation again and rebuild onto that security and the attachment that we already have with our children. And then we can come to our therapist and be like, I have all this frustration. I feel like a volcano. And we seek guidance on how can we let this volcano erupt in a safe setting so that next time this incident comes up, we can respond to it in a way that we can feel happier about, more effective about, or more proud of, because a lot of us here are cycle breakers. Yeah. Um, so instead of saying, why do you always push back? Or why are you always so naughty? Why do you always do the opposite of what I say? Um, I understand you don't like this rule, but it's actually really important. I'm here to help you through it if you need. Yeah. And this might be a time where you do want to have a chat, right? Maybe you can say, do you have any questions about this? Like, see if there might be an understanding gap or a different way of using language. The punishment versus natural consequences. Children learn best through experience, not fear. Yeah. So we just spoke about people saying, our parents saying things to us like, do this or you'll get punished for that, or, you have to do what I say because I'm the adult. Um, and that's kind of just creating a fear response in the child, right? So that's creating more dysregulation. Um, they'll do what you say, but only when you're in the room because they're scared of you. It won't be coming from a genuine place of respect and understanding. So while punishment focuses on control and obedience, natural and logical consequences help children understand the impact of their choices. So when children feel safe to make mistakes, they develop problem-solving skills, accountability, and trust in their caregivers. Now, of course, we want our kids. We care about our kids a lot, and we don't want them to feel pain or discomfort. So sometimes we're putting these boundaries in place because we're so scared that they'll be uncomfortable. But that's not actually on you, right? You have to make sure they stay alive. You have to make sure they eat. Like there's these things that are on you, but you can reassess what mistakes you're allowed to let them make. Yeah. So though we can't protect them from everything, right? And the sooner they learn about consequences, the sooner they take accountability for themselves and they start showing up in their own lives. So giving them the space to make mistakes and learn from them, and then come to us and seek our support when they've realized, and creating that safety, right? It helps them to build resilience, understand natural boundaries living in this world, and develop a secure attachment with us. So, how to use consequences instead of punishment. So, let natural consequences teach the lesson. You forgot your jacket? Well, you might be cold today because it is cold outside. Yeah. And it might look like, oh, wow, you've made this mess and we were supposed to leave. Well, we're just going to have to be 5 minutes late because we're going to have to clean this up first. So use logical consequences. The toys weren't put away, so we'll have to take a break for them until they can be cleaned up. Yeah. Um, Create a safe space for learning. Encourage them to come to you and when they've made a mistake, especially without fearing your response to it. Because if they're coming to you to let you know they've made a mistake, part of that is asking for you to help them. So if they're hiding it from you, there's going to be a reason for that. Yeah, if they're too scared to tell you about mistakes, they might be scared of your emotional response to that. So create an environment where they can come to you, and yeah, you might be quite angry later, and that's fine. But in that moment, see how you can hold space for them and support their problem solving. So instead of scolding, help them find the way that they can fix the problem they might have created. Um, and that might be you holding their hand doing it with them. So instead of you spilled your juice and now you're in trouble, say, oops, the juice spilled. Let's grab that towel and clean it up together. Avoid labeling them. Yeah, so calling them naughty or bad impacts a child's sense of self-esteem, their attachment with you. When children are pushing boundaries, they're learning, not misbehaving. Yeah, children can't be expected to know all the things that adults know yet. So scolding or labeling them can create fear, shame, and disconnection rather than fostering growth and understanding. So instead of responding with labels, you can try describing what you see. Instead of judgment, reflect their behaviors. Yeah, so instead of saying you've been really naughty or you've made a huge mess, try, oh wow, I can see you threw that toy. Yeah. Um, Guide self-moderation. So give them space to actually recognize themselves and adjust their own actions. You might have put a boundary in place recently and you're giving them an opportunity to try that out for themselves, try the problem solving again. Encourage that problem solving. So that toy is for playing, not for throwing. Do you want to try again, or should we actually put it away? Separating actions from identity. So saying you are naughty or you're being naughty, children internalize that and they start to see themselves as naughty, which can create shame, disconnection, insecure attachment. So that's going to make it harder for them to come to you when they do make some mistakes, and they're going to hide that from you and they'll feel very isolated. So instead, try things like that behavior isn't safe. Yeah, it's not safe to hit people, or, we don't yell at people, but it's fair for you to have these emotions. Stay curious and not critical. Understand the reason behind the behavior. So look for the needs and the values underneath it instead of reacting with frustration. So instead of saying stop being naughty, you can say, I can see that you're frustrated. Let's find a way to work through this together. The kids are allowed to have boundaries too. And this one doesn't always get taught, right? And we know that ourselves because a lot of us are adults who are learning boundaries for the first time because we were taught we weren't allowed to have our own boundaries. We had to always just be obedient. So this is a really important one because when children learn boundaries early, they learn how to respect them early. So teach your children about boundaries to help them develop self-respect, confidence, and healthy relationships. When children understand their bodies, their feelings, and their personal space that are worthy and deserve to be respected, they're more likely to honor others' boundaries. Key lessons for teaching boundaries. Bodily autonomy. Children should feel in control of their own bodies. You can encourage them to decide who they hug, high five, or share personal space with. No means no. Teach them that their no is important and should be respected, just as they should respect other people's boundaries. Consent matters. Help them to practice asking for and receiving consent in everyday situations. Yeah, and that can just look like playing and borrowing toys, asking if they can join in, expressing when they don't want someone else to join in. Yeah. Model boundary setting. Show them how to set their own boundaries by saying things like, I'm not in a mood for a hug right now, but I'd love a high five. Yeah. So offering people like what you'd prefer instead is a really good one. Encourage expression. Let them know that it's okay to speak up and if something's making them uncomfortable. And this is really critical for them and for their safety in their own lives. So instead of saying, go give grandma a hug, would you like to give grandma a hug, a wave, or a high five? Yeah, offering them options around their own body and their own experience. Holding boundaries with children. So setting boundaries with kids, again, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the start. It's about guidance, safety, mutual respect, not about control. So by approaching boundaries with consistency, empathy, and clear communication, we create a supportive environment where children feel safe, valued, and empowered to develop essential life skills. So the key takeaways from this are to regulate yourself first and stay calm. You know, do what you need to outside of that, outside of your relationship, to let go of any boiling underlying emotions and reflect on why you might react particular ways, how others have set boundaries with you, or you know, maybe you grew up around more control. How do you want to change your own behavior? How do you want to see things differently? And what do you need to do that? Yeah, what sort of supports do you need in place to do that? Be clear and consistent. So using concise, direct language that is, you know, always the same and not shifting. So no wishy-washy stuff. Validating their feelings. So noticing when they're having large emotional responses and not dismissing them, holding space for them before you reiterate the boundary. Using redirection and positive reframing to focus on the behaviors you do want and you want to encourage at home. Respecting their boundaries, so teaching them consent, bodily autonomy, and the importance of their own personal needs so that they gain a deeper understanding of why boundaries are so important to everybody. Shifting from punishment to consequences. So letting them learn from their own mistakes and see how consequences actually exist in the real world. Yeah, you don't have to fix everything for them. Let them fix things themselves and just be there to support them while they do that. And avoid labeling and shaming them because this will affect their sense of self-confidence, their sense of self-worth, their connection with you. And when you instead offer them like the above, you're focusing on guidance and problem solving. So today we've explored some really practical left-brained ways to set boundaries. However, if you have a lot of nervous system dysregulation, even these really practical tips can be hard to follow and they might not always work. You know, like we said at the start, kids can sense your dysregulation. So even if you feel like you're doing these things perfectly, if you're secretly boiling on the inside, you're like a kettle with the lid on, they're noticing this. They're going to respond to that, right? So if you have tried these things already and they haven't worked, we're going to need to try some right brain processes to support your regulation. So we're going to work with your body we're going to help you to release all that underlying stress so that you can breathe through these. Yeah. And your kid will start showing up with a lot of the regulation you have going on. If you're calmer, they're going to be calmer. Yeah. So you'll see that mirrored. And that's why we've created a 4-week program called Boundaries with Kids, where we will explore this on a deeper level. So we can reflect on how our own conditioning has caused like those power struggles and our struggles with being able to state our boundaries with clarity. And some people believe they're stating things with boundary, and I'll say to them, what did you say? And they'll be like, I glared at them. And I'll be like, that probably wasn't clear, right? Like that might not have landed. Yeah, so we can reflect on that. We will also look at how our kids pick up on our nervous system more, how we can use fight flight energy in more effective ways because we have that response for a reason. It is actually supposed to be a part of our bodies, a part of our systems. We don't have to feel guilt and shame about it, but we can use it in better ways. And how to find the right regulation tools. Not everything works for everyone. Some tools are more effective, and we want to release that pent up energy so that we can come to these things with more clarity without lashing out because we're frustrated. Um, we'll also do some identifying personal triggers, noticing our emotional reactions, working out the why, like what Carrie was saying earlier, and how to recognize fight, flight, and the freeze fawn responses in our bodies and what we can do with them instead. There's also another 100 billion things that we'll be doing. But these are some of the big points I work with often. Yeah. Um, so that is coming up. We'll be running this workshop in just a couple of weeks' time on Thursdays. Um, and they'll be in small groups and we'll be co-regulating together. We'll be sharing without judgment because we've all been here, we've all lost our temper. And it'll be a shared space for us to learn and grow together and share experiences. So that starts on March 20 and it runs for 4 weeks. It's at 10 a.m. Perth time, 1 p.m. Victoria time. And as a bonus, we're offering the recording of Carrie's workshop, Right Brain, Left Brain, which is fantastic, by the way. I love it. I recommend it to people all the time. So that will help you to speak to your child in regards to their dominant hemisphere.
Can I jump in, Ash?
Go for it.
So, as some of you may know, I run my own 4-week program, which is the Motherhood Reset. And there's just something about a group program, particularly in motherhood, where if you're a cycle breaker and you don't really have anyone to really openly share with, the biggest feedback I have is not this tool worked for me, this topic was great. It was this group allowed me to share. And that was so healing because I shared without judgment. So these group programs are so important if you're looking for a community to work through this stuff with. Yes, you may have a therapist you do one-on-one stuff with. Ash also offers that, and it's so amazing to do one-on-one stuff. But there is something about getting a group of women together who are working on this together and
Yeah.
even just being able to turn up to a call and say, oh, my kid did this and this is what I did. I completely flipped my lid. I regretted it, but like this is the reality. This is what the current dynamic is. And to be met with like a virtual hug and like let's solve this together. Like this is a normal response based on your conditioning and your nervous system, but let's work on it together. So I really encourage you to step into this if you feel called to work more through boundaries specifically, because you will get so much value out of it.
Thank you. And yeah, I totally agree. It's so powerful, and we often feel quite isolated, especially in these circumstances. So being able to come together and support each other, there is something really powerful in that. Mm. To finish, remember boundaries aren't about perfection. They're about building trust, emotional resilience, and a sense of security. All right. We have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to open this up. Carrie, please jump in here, right? Because you have so much wisdom to offer as well. So I want you to also respond to anything that comes up. I'm just going to read through them. Thank you so much for these comments. They're so lovely.
Thank you. So I think the first question is, can this work with children with trauma as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If anything, children with trauma are going to need even more care and understanding and structure. Yeah. It might be harder with kids who have been through a lot of trauma, but one of the things that's done really well with especially like play therapists is knowing exactly where the boundaries have to be and when to loosen the ropes. Yeah. So with kids with boundaries, with a lot of trauma, we don't want the boundaries to feel like control. We really do not need them to be stricter than they need to be, right? If the child is deciding to leave without their jacket, you are welcome to grab their jacket for them, but there's no reason to like force that, if that's making sense. But you need to enforce what is safe and what isn't safe. So that's when you will have a bit of a stricter boundary, but we don't need to like overdo that. So give them ways in which they can have a little bit of free reign as well. So that might be like, oh, you can see they're being really creative. Encourage that. Bring in more materials, give them a few more things to play with, let them get that out in really healthy and safe ways. Yeah, so just supporting them. But absolutely, like people with even adults with trauma really require those structure and clear boundaries.
Would you say that, like, in my experience, they also need to really deeply feel that they have the autonomy, like that
Yeah.
creates safety for them because they haven't really been able to rely on anyone else in their lifetime, right? Usually that childhood trauma stuff. So, like,
Yeah.
creating it in a way where they have that felt sense of autonomy,
Yeah.
side boundaries, of course, but like they
Mhm.
know that they've chosen that almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Having like letting them know that they're in control of themselves will actually set up more safety and security. So
Yeah.
when you are providing structure, it will feel held, and avoiding like the shaming and stuff and just focusing on behavior. We don't do that behavior is going to be another reason for them to be able to co-regulate with you. They're going to test you as well. Kids with trauma are going to test you. They're going to say and do and reenact some of the things that they've seen and experienced, and that's going to be trying at times. Yeah, they might put you in a perpetrator role, or they might want to play games that actually make you go, oh, I'm uncomfortable with this, right? But there is actually that's a part of their expression is going on because they're trying to reconcile what they've been through. So they're replaying experiences to make more sense of it. So you actually want to show up with even stronger boundaries. Yeah. So like if we're playing cops and robbers because they've seen some things go down, right? um, you want to make sure that you're reinforcing, oh, wow, there is that experience. Wow, that would really hurt my feelings if that happened. And reflecting emotions. Oh, that hurt my feelings when that happened, and letting that just sink in for a second, letting them see that reflected and being able to see that in themselves. What are they feeling right now? Um, so yeah, I would use all the things we've said today and put even more energy in.
I feel like you could do a whole presentation just on like trauma. I'm going to jump to the next question though.
Yeah.
And so the reframe, hitting a pillow to get energy out instead of hitting a friend, what other ways could they express this energy?
Oh, that's a great question, right? So, where do I start? Um, so if they're in the mood for punching, right? So they've got their fists and that, right? So we want to encourage that punching energy because there is something in their arms right now that is really in the fight energy. So it can be like as simple as it might be throwing bean bags or something, really getting some arm energy going. It might be like a baseball bat or like a cricket bat or something, and letting them kind of hit the ground or but providing the safety and security, being like, we only hit the grass, or we can do this, but we're doing it in this, still provide the structure behind it. This is how we're doing it instead.
Ash, how would you feel about like play wrestling? Like
Hmm.
getting them to get their fight out, but also learning, oh, this is when we stop. The person I'm wrestling with said stop. That's the boundary, like
Yeah,
safety in that. It would depend on the child, obviously, but
yeah.
play fighting.
Yeah, I think that, look, that one could be a wobbly line. I think sometimes it actually does get recommended a lot. So if we're seeing it, especially if we're seeing it with teens or older kids, we would actually refer them to go and do something like study a martial art. Because in martial arts, they have those really strong boundaries in place of how we're allowed to touch other people, how we can be touched ourselves, when it's appropriate, when it must stop. So it provides a lot of structure around how to move that energy. So with my adult clients, if we're seeing a lot of fight energy, I'm like, you need to join a boxing gym. You need to do some ways to get that energy off that is also um, works for the world, right?
Yeah. One that a lot of mums that I know do. I don't know if it's just like an innate thing, but like, driving your car somewhere and being alone and just like yelling. Just
Oh
like,
yeah. Yeah, 100%.
get out, you're
Yeah.
alone, you're safe. But just like needing to shout into the abyss,
Yeah.
like, um,
I will tell people to put metal music on and just like totally go for it, right? Find what works, especially if it's like if you're noticing your like energy in your hands, you're clenching your fists and your teeth and right, like really let it out. Go full ham on it. Just do it when no one's home, so we're not scaring people, in safe ways. Like do the screaming, get it off your chest, call the air, a this word and a that word, and like say the things you want to be saying and yell them and scream them, and then you'll actually find you come back to regulation so quickly. And
yeah.
that's what we want for the kids, right? If they're punching, if there's some energy going on, give them a way to let it out and then see how they return to the boundary again. See if they can hear you better next time. Because if they're being taught they're naughty when they express, they're gonna push it down. And then the next time something happens, it's like the volcano gets bigger and bigger because there's more lava inside, right?
Mm.
Mm.
One final question is, do you have specific ages for this new program? So, example between ages 3 and 9, or is it really for mums of kids of any age? Yeah.
Honestly, it's for everyone. Like, like you could come to this program without kids because there's the ways we set boundaries in the world, are really important. right? The ways we set and hold boundaries are really important and they can be very universal. But what we'll do is we're going to take everybody's, whoever comes to the program, we're going to work with what comes up. So the age groups and the age ranges that are around, because yes, we might need to change language, but the principles are the same.
Yeah, beautiful. Ash, I'm going to get you to stop sharing your screen.
Mhm.
And I just really wanted to finish by um, saying that, yeah, it's a really tough, like you touched on, Ash. Most of us were raised in a generation where we were fear-based, punishment-based. Now we've got children, we're trying to parent them differently, but most of us are still in contact with the people who we probably still dip into that, like, oh, I can't set a boundary with my mum because she's my mum and she's the authority. And probably even if I try to, shit will hit
Mhm.
the fan. Sorry for the language, like there's this dynamic with our own mum. And then trying to help our child set a boundary with the person who never allowed us to set a boundary. Like there's so much nuance in all of this stuff and what that does to our nervous system and like even just like overrunning like your mind can run over scenarios over and over in your head, right? Of like, what can I have done better? Or why can't I set a boundary with my mum? So, like, even if you're thinking, I'm doing an okay job with my kids, I feel really good, but then, bring other people into the picture and the nervous system just falls apart because you drop into your child version
Mhm.
like then your mum is trying to set the same boundaries with your kids. Like it's a whole thing. So yeah, if any of this resonated with you, I deeply encourage you to join Ash to explore all of it in this group program. If you can't make these dates, we will be running it again, but I'm not really sure when yet. So if you can, jump in straight away and join us for this March and April one. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, anything you want to finish with, Ash?
Oh, it's just an absolute joy to be able to support people through all of this. I know how hard it is too, right? I had to learn all this stuff for myself. Um, and so yeah, it's absolute pleasure. And if you do have, if these dates don't work, reach out and tell us that you're interested because we might be able to work out another time sooner. Yeah, so I'm just stoked to be running this. So thank you so much, Carrie.
Thanks, Ash.
Mm.